What is happening out there, Roto Scouts basketball fans? Welcome to a Monday show, gang. Our first get-together post-NFL regular season. Ended with kind of a stumble last night in the Sunday night game. I had a lot of weight in that one for DFS for season long, and Vikings side certainly didn't work out. Nice if you had Jahmyr Gibbs, though. That was pretty solid. We've got a little basketball slate to talk about today. 8 gamer lined up on both sites. FanDuel dropping the late games for a change. Or the late game. I think it's just one. Accidentally started adding those guys to the out list before I realized that earlier. We've got everything squared away. We are starting up pretty late, so I'm just going to kind of dive in. We'll see who arrives. Looks like Cujo's here hanging out. Happy Monday back to you, buddy. We'll see who else makes it in. I know there's competing shows, and it was very short notice that this was going to go live. Had to rerun multiple sims to get things corrected. Ran it, and then Azure Thompson went out. I should have had him out to begin with. Then I realized I didn't have Simone Fontecchio on the board, so I had to put him in and rerun it. So multiple reruns kind of pushed the show back by about a half hour from where I wanted to start it, or a little bit longer than that. But hopefully people find it trickle in. I'm just going to dive in, though, and start talking, and I'll try and jump back and forth to chat, but I'm also trying to get us out of here by like 6 o'clock, so it is going to be, the probably shortest show, fastest show of the year. We'll see how we do. Let's talk Vegas board. Portland at Detroit. Detroit favored by 6.5 in a home game against the weak Blazers. Detroit obviously missing some pretty critical pieces. Has a downstream impact. We kind of know what it looks like, but now no Azure Thompson in that one, and a little bit more of a wrinkle there. But it's generally going to be the usual pieces and parts that we're getting lately from Detroit in that one. On the Portland side, nothing springs to mind that's going to be coming up a lot from them, but we'll obviously see how they land on the board. 224-point total in that one. Not a terrible game environment, but just kind of mid overall. Phoenix at Philly. A lot of changes for Phoenix. Apparently, Beal and Nurk are going to come off of the bench. There's all kinds of trade winds blowing, all kinds of discontent going on. Right now, they're in a pretty decent-looking game, though. 3 points. They're 3-point dogs on the road in Philadelphia. 222.5-point total in that one. We'll see what comes up on the Philly side. A lot of guys questionable, including Embiid, so we'll see who's active and go from there. Ugly game environment between the Magic and the Knicks. Knicks have a couple question marks. Karl Anthony Towns, Deuce McBride, both questionable. Jalen Brunson is probable in that one. Knicks are favored by 12 in a home game. The Magic still super depleted from what their normal setup is. But it's still going to be a slow, grindy kind of a game as far as DFS goes. I don't know that we get to too much of this one. 210-point total in that one should be pretty telling. It's 10 points offset at best. 8 points. That's actually the game that's not on the slate, though. It's offset by 8 from the game that's on the slate. Every game that's on the or not on the slate. Every game that's on the slate. No, Clips and T-Wolves 4.5 points offset. Okay, there's that one. And then everything else is 10 plus beyond it. So it's a low end game. The Bucks and the Raptors. Bucks are favored by 6 on the road in Toronto. 230-point total. Indy and Brooklyn. That's a 10-point game in Indy's favor on the road in Brooklyn. 223-point total there. Brooklyn missing a ton of guys as usual. Going to get some values there for sure. The Clippers at the T-Wolves. Interesting game there. That's the 214.5-point game. Wolves favored by 2.5 at home. They've been kind of scuffling lately, but still a lot of good pieces and parts. But overall, that is kind of a defensively focused game between those two squads, and it is definitely a low-end total overall. Dallas still without Luka, now without Kyrie as well. Obviously, we're going to see some pieces from that one. But some of those prices have normalized. Some of those guys just kind of suck as far as getting to them when they're value plays, like Spencer Dinwiddie. We'll see how we do in that one. I'm sure they'll come up quite a bit. On the Memphis side, it's another situation with Memphis. Everybody's out, but everybody plays mid-20s minutes outside of a couple obvious guys up at the top of the board. Scottie Pippen, I know, is coming up with a ton of ownership, but he hasn't really been playing extended minutes lately, so kind of concerning there. 231.5-point total in that one. And then we round things out with San Antonio against the Bulls, 236-point total. San Antonio favored by 3 on the road in Chicago. Not bad. As far as the ins and the outs, Cole Anthony. Thank you, Mamba. Did I not mention him? I know I did as I was breezing through that. The game environment sucks there, but I appreciate you mentioning that. He's obviously sitting at the top of the board there at 97% DraftKings ownership in our top 150. So we wouldn't have forgotten him, but it did slip my mind to mention him as I was breaking that down. I'm just looking at the Vegas board as I'm doing that, so that's all top of the head. But yeah, with all those missing pieces, most specifically lately, Jalen Suggs now out for multiple games for Orlando, just thrusts Cole Anthony up to the top of the board. He's a very good point per minute player overall, just needs the minutes typically, and DraftKings left him way too cheap. FanDuel corrected it. He's 6,400 on FanDuel, and we still got him 31% of the time and level with the field. That's how strong a play he looks like in a per minute sense. But at 4,900 on DraftKings, he should essentially be in every lineup. That is close to a lock kind of a play. Never going to actually say lock. Don't like using that word at all on shows, but that's closing in on that kind of a territory. You can see the value mark on the board. So updates through the afternoon. Aja Thompson was out, changed that after the initial cut of projections went up. Probables, DeAndre Ayton, Cade Cunningham, who's available. Giannis is probable. Jalen Brunson is probable. And Yuki Kawamura is probable. Questionables, Joel Embiid, Kyle Lowry, Kelly Oubre Jr., so you can see a little bit of a potential impact for the Sixers. Thompson is now out. D'Lo is questionable. D'Angelo Russell. Ben Simmons is also questionable. A couple big pieces there potentially for the Nets. Andre Jackson Jr. is questionable. RJ Barrett, Deuce McBride, Karl Anthony Towns. Only one of those guys is on the Knicks. The other two are on the Raptors right now. Two of those guys are on the Knicks. The other one is on the Raptors. Speaking, I was thinking Deuce McBride was Emmanuel Quickly. Quickly's kind of interesting today. Luke Kennard, Luka Garza, and Josh Manat are all questionables. Royce O'Neal, KJ Martin, Jared McCain, Jeremy Grant, Matty Thybulle, Jaden Ivey, Isaiah Jackson, Aaron Nesmith, James Wiseman, Bojan Bogdanovic, Cam Johnson, Max Lewis, D'Anthony Melton, Cam Thomas, Trenton Watford, Chris Middleton, Paolo Banchero, Gary Harris, Jalen Suggs, Franz Wagner, Mo Wagner, Mitch Robinson, Luka Doncic, Dante Exum, Kyrie Irving, Santi Aldama, Desmond Bane, Gigi Jackson, John Morant, Marcus Smart, Vince Williams Jr., Rob Dillingham, Torrey Craig, and Ayo Dosunmu are all out. Technically, Bane and Middleton are both doubtful, but does not seem like they're going to go. Appreciate you, Mamba. I know you're always there to have my back and stir things up with some of your takes where we disagree on certain things about how to go about things. You're always coming at things from slightly different angles and everything. And I think it's great. I think it helps the show. So I know you got my back with that, buddy. I appreciate you. Appreciate everybody out there. Hit the like button as we start going through things. Feel like it's going to be a small show, and that's okay with the late start. And just going to, like I said, kind of turbo our way through this if we can. Let's get into some positions. We can go same everything by DK today because it's the same slate on both sites, at least as far as which games are on it. So, yeah, Cole Anthony, top of the board on DraftKings. That 4,900 is just too low. He's a 1.07 per minute player on DK. It's a 5.39 value score on FanDuel for the higher price. That's how good of a per minute option he is. 1.03 per minute, 26% usage for the season. It was 23% last year. Some of that is flexible just given what his role actually is. He's playing like 13, 14 minutes a night off of the bench typically. He played 28 and a half minutes the other day, put up a 24.8 on FanDuel. That is good enough for our money, and I've got him projected for the same 28 minutes. With his typical numbers, we're going north of that mark. So definitely looks critical on DraftKings. Very, very playable on FanDuel. It's more of a point where if we're directly level with the field on FanDuel, as usual, I would rather have a bit of a position on a play like that. I think it's 64, given that it's still a 5.3 plus value score. Closing in on 5.4 and beat out. Great. Totally different slate already. I gotta start doing these shows at like noon. Just take the comfortable route in the morning. Right? Just do like a projection show. Sit there and while I put the minutes and everything together. Like Josh's old process show that he used to do. He doesn't do that anymore, right? He's doing I think he's doing one at noon. That's the right idea. Takes the pressure off of changes like that. You're not going to get crazy slate changing news. And if you do, it doesn't matter quite as much. So now more impetus to be off of here by 6 o'clock. Continuing on though. So on FanDuel, I do think I'd rather have, I think it's still more of Cole Anthony. I think I'm good getting there because that 64 is still a little bit too low. So I think that's worth trying to chase a little bit up the ladder. And I'd rather be above than with the field, or I'd rather be below than with the field. So I think you pick a lane since we came up dead even with. Maybe you give it a little bit of a tweak in terms of the projection or the standard deviation number to make that happen in your sims and your optimizers. Devin Vassell, solid mixer on FanDuel, a little bit below the field. I'm happy with that result, 20%. He's a 5.21 value score, so is Cade Cunningham in the next spot. They're very differently priced, obviously, and one's a shooting guard, one's a point guard. On DraftKings, there's not really even much commonality. Shooting guard, small forward versus point guard. So similar distribution of shares. We're above the field at 44% on Devin Vassell on DraftKings because he's only 61 over there versus 65 on FanDuel. We're a little bit below the field on the Cade Cunningham play on DK at 37%, but still significantly exposed to both guys. But for the 10K on FanDuel, we're actually getting 12% and well below the field on Cade, which is kind of interesting given the star caliber player with the big projection, the big standard deviation, and a big per minute number. Getting him below the field like that when he comes up at a 5.21 value score is interesting, but we're getting boxed out by some of the Quickly shares, who was top of mind before when I was talking about those Knicks. We're getting a fair amount of Cole Anthony coming through the mix. So I get why he'd be a little bit below given that high price, and I expect we're getting other superstars on FanDuel in that place as far as the salary goes. A little bit smoother on DraftKings, being able to get to just everybody in this top end. $5,500 D-Lo if he plays, definitely worthwhile on DraftKings. That price is still too low. 0.98 per minute. Sees enough usage to get by, and we're still trying to figure out exactly what the role looks like with Brooklyn, but played... Oh, what happened here? That was mixed minutes. Has been playing better minutes. Is that why he's questionable today? Did he come out of that game? A little short over the last couple days. Last week just drove me nuts. I think last week was like the worst week of the NBA season so far as just all the stupid nonsense that was going on with a lot of these teams. All right, so yeah, it was 14 minutes in the last game. It was 28 minutes in the game before that, so he came out of that one. But the 28 minutes was the number I was looking for. I think that's going to be our norm, 28 to 30, with upside into the 32 kind of a range typically. And we know that he's a good enough player. On FanDuel at 71, he doesn't come up at all. Literally 0 shares. He has a 4.3 value there. That price is probably a little high. I think we could settle somewhere in the middle at like 65 and be average on him. But the DraftKings number is just too low. 5.84 value score. We're looking for 5.5. We're well over the threshold. 0.98 per minute. Works for me. Malik Beasley definitely has gained ground for Detroit just with some missing bodies there. He's going to get his 30 and change minutes here. 5,300 is too low on FanDuel, 56. The sites haven't really adjusted for the current role for Beasley. And when he's in this kind of a role, he's a good enough per minute performer. 0.86 per minute for the season. A little bit of an uptick recently. When he's allowed to take some shots, he's gonna. So I think you can get there easily on Beasley. Yeah, that's all right. It wasn't easy on Beasley. 46% on FanDuel. We're level with the field for the 5.69 value score. Same deal on DraftKings, 34% level with the field for 56. I think he works. He's at worst a functional mid-range parter, like lower mid-range or upper low end type of a guy. Gary Trent, give me all the Malik Beasleys compares to Gary Trent's 4.39 on the value scale in 24 minutes at 4,100 on FanDuel. On DraftKings, much different play. He's 3,300 over there. He's only a 0.66 per minute DraftKings player, but that comes up enough. That's a functional building block type value play. 27% over there. We do have, again, Giannis is probable, and then Andre Jackson is questionable in that one. Conceivably, there could be another minute or two available for Gary Trent. Anthony Edwards is who he is kind of a game. At worst. 9,000 shooting guard, small forward. We got him 7% of the time below the field on FanDuel, 13% of the time and below the field at 85 on DraftKings. He looks a little better to me on DK. Well, actually, no. That's essentially the same as far as the distance from the value threshold that we want. At worst, he's very, very playable. But again, it does look like we're spending some of that money at other spots on, especially on FanDuel. Dame is not that spot. 6% of him on FanDuel, 10.6%. We're below the field on both sites. Another guy, though, I've already got him at 36 minutes. I don't know that I give him a 37th. If there's no Jackson, it's probably just a downstream impact to other guys. But Dame is Dame. It's a soft spot against Toronto. There's no reason he couldn't succeed at these numbers. Quentin Grimes, moderately appealing. just a 0.86 per minute guy, but that's up from the 0.66 that he put up last year. He's seen 2 percentage points more of usage this season, playing a large role in this configuration of Dallas with their 2 star guards out. I'd rather have Grimes than, I'm sure he's on the board here somewhere, Dinwiddie, who's just a generally disappointing kind of a player. The hell is Dinwiddie? There he is. Unfortunately, on FanDuel, we got 23% of Dinwiddie. We got, was it a Grimes? 2% of Grimes. So we're getting more Dinwiddie on FanDuel for sure. He's 56. They're the same price. Different positioning is probably what's impacting it there. I would so much rather have Quentin Grimes in that situation. On DraftKings, we got 10% of Grimes, and it looks like we didn't really get any of Dinwiddie. Yeah, literally zero Dinwiddie because he's 6,500. That's a big price. FanDuel kept them in reasonable territory. It's 0.84 per minute on DraftKings, 0.83. Technically, it's similar to the production from Grimes. I don't know. Maybe it's anecdotal. It just seems like Quentin Grimes is a much more productive player. But numbers are giving us some on FanDuel. I'll take what I get spot at the 15 to 20 range, but I'm happy with the positioning being below the field. Yeah, it's a 5+ value score, but we got plenty of them to work with. Jalen Wells, pretty cheap on FanDuel, 30+ minutes. He played 35 the other day. It's a depleted Memphis team again. It's crazy how the just entire team goes on and off the injured list. It's unreal. But there's constant value with Memphis. You just got to get the guys right, and Wells definitely has justification as far as those minutes go. So 4,700, no price change really. Shooting guard and small forward eligible. He's only a 0.75 per minute guy. Average-ish kind of usage in the 17% range. On DraftKings for 53, it's a different price, different play. Shooting guard, small forward eligible, sure, but 8%. He's just a mixer on the DK slate. He is a 5+ value, but that's short of our 5.5 that we want. Way different play over here. As far as the next batch of guys, it's all just onesie, twosie shares. We're basically below the field on most of those. Part of that is impacted by the fact that 97% of these shares went to Cole Anthony. So you can consider, if you're not going 90+ lock-in Cole Anthony style, you can consider that any of these numbers could be a little bit higher and closer to the field. But as usual, what I don't want to try to do is get everybody back to the field. Pick a few positions if you're going to make changes. Take advantage and make positional changes and get above the field on one guy, or take further below the field on some of these guys, closer to the field but still a big advantage on Cole Anthony, and then a position or two probably on these types of guys, right? Because you don't need to go all the way down to those, and those are the worst overall plays. Not worst, but worse than these guys. Even though these guys come up, it doesn't necessarily matter that these guys are drawing ownership. These are better plays. That's why they're getting ownership. So that's still going to continue to be where you want to make most of those pivots, is into the guys that are getting popularity. And then for some of these guys, like I was saying, you can zero some of them down and then just build up little positions on the other guys that are above but closer to the field, let's say. That group includes Shaden Sharp, Keon Johnson, Klay Thompson, Andrew Nembhard, Timmy Hardaway, Anthony Simons, TJ McConnell, Dante DiVincenzo, AJ Green, Paul George. All guys with reasonable expectations of either their usual minutes or a path to increased minutes, increased role. Outside of maybe TJ McConnell, who's just in his typical 18-minute situation, but is just a tremendous per-minute player, so he can pay off those values from time to time and creeps into our lineups at this level all the time. Everybody else, though, on that list, not a priority on DraftKings, but playable, with at least normal expectations or a bit of a story. So there's reason to move some of those pieces around. Like AJ Green could benefit if Jackson doesn't go. 28 minutes, though, I've got him at 3,800. Point guard, shooting guard, we got him 4%. Maybe you push that up a little bit. Dante DiVincenzo playing better, but the price is just kind of flat. If you dip down into the upper fours, you might have an advantageous play there. Sub 5 DraftKings, sub 5 FanDuel value score. Paul George with Embiid out now, that probably goes up a little bit. Maxey will definitely go up a little bit. Don't know where he is. We already got Maxey 11% on FanDuel. Did not get him on DraftKings. But the point of running through those DK guys is because we do have a couple outliers here. Timmy Hardaway on FanDuel coming up nearly 15% of the time. He's only 4,000 shooting guard and small forward. That's a mixer of value with a really, really, really bad per minute guy that I would always rather have somebody else. But he is playable. But I would definitely be at best our position against the field here. And honestly, if I'm whittling Timmy Hardaway down into the single digits and getting him more at like this kind of an angle against the field, so much the better. I'm happy to do that. And there are plays that you can sink those shares into. I would take a fair number of these. Well, it's only a slight gain as far as the per minute. I was going to say and put them into Gary Trent. You're not really gaining ground. You're losing minutes, and it's on a very similarly low per minute guy, so maybe not there. If you could get to Jalen Wells, that would be where to put those Hardaway shares. And honestly, well, we didn't get any of Gary Trent at 41, but yeah, like if I could get those shares, it's probably not possible in the lineup, obviously not directly in the lineup configurations, but this $4,000 Tim Hardaway play, the lineups that are built with that in are probably pretty fundamentally different than the lineups that the Jalen Wells shares go to. So there might not be room to actually pivot that, but it's worth exploring. Whatever shares you can, I would probably just move from Timmy and get more even than this of Wells. Keon Johnson, 25% below the field, but starters run for the Nets. Potentially more missing pieces for the Nets, depending on how things go with their ins and outs. 0.77 per minute, but 32 minutes is viable for those shares. But again, another guy below the field, and I'm pretty okay being below the field. If you see the numbers go up as far as the projection, if you see him even gain to like, two fantasy points to like 29, then maybe you add a little bit more. And that would probably just level him off with the field, or maybe the field goes up alongside that. Josh Giddey, 34% with IO out is interesting, has been interesting, 1.19 overall per minute. Still relatively affordable at $7,000 on FanDuel, both guard spots. $7,700 point guard only on DraftKings. We barely got him, 2%. He's a mix and match guy at best. You can consider him in this group, and there are justifiable reasons to expect a good game from him. But getting him to the point where he's crushing a $7,700 salary as far as value goes, not great. He is still a 5+, but again, we want 5.5 on DraftKings. 12% of Chris Paul. Take him or leave him. The value's there, though, 5.25. Scottie Pippen at 5.18. Again, 5.18 is a value score. For 6,000, that is a very strong inflection point. We're getting him 20% of the time and hard undercut to the field. He's super popular on FanDuel because, at least in the place that I got the ownership from, they had him at like 30-plus minutes. And he really hasn't been playing that lately. So I undercut his minutes a little bit here, and I think that's correct. So getting him at 20%, I'm kind of happy that we get him a decent amount. And I'm fine at being at 1 and 5. And if we're right about the minutes, we'll be right about the play. Now, at 26 minutes for 6,000, he is still a 5+ value play on FanDuel. He's a 1.09 per minute player. So no reason to want to completely skip him. And the only reason I am good being down here versus the field is because I don't think he's going to play those minutes that the field was projected at. I have no idea where he's projected on other sites other than where I got this ownership from. I think they're wrong. See if they changed it. He hasn't played more than 27 minutes. He played 27 in the last game. Hasn't played more than that in their last 5. Last 5 a 24-minute average. Last 10 is a 22-minute average, but obviously things change, going back in time with starters being available. But it's not like he's playing 32, 33 minutes a night like at one point he was with some of these missing bodies. D'Lo and Ben Simmons out. Well, that's fun. Again, all the more reason to. Knicks recall Porty, so that's likely Cat being out. Yeah, I would say that's probably accurate, Power. So what that'll do, talking through those, yeah, Caleb Martin, David is going to be it'll be an is who he is kind of a spot where like he could potentially do more, but probably won't, and is just going to be a his usual mid per minute type. But like there's a path to believing in that success, but I'm not going to give him more minutes than I'm already giving him, or maybe he picks up like goes from 32 to 33, 34 would be the outside. He's a 0.7 per minute guy in general. I'll double check what the rate is in the change situation, but I don't remember off the top of my head that it goes up to any kind of extreme where you'd, prioritize him. He's 49 on FanDuel, 48 on DK, and there are just already such an abundance of values up here that we're getting to that I think he just kind of slots in alongside those guys and doesn't quite look good. I think the guys that you want from Philly would be the Maxis and the Paul Georges of the world. And then, we'll keep an eye, obviously, on other guys being out, and there could be more downstream impact. I don't know if we've gotten news on Lowry and Oubre yet. I'm just working off the Embiid part. So Ayton in, fine. That's projected that way. So for the Knicks, it's an interesting one as far as the immediate value is going to be Precious Achiuwa, I would think. And then Jericho Sims, like backup behind him. McPorty probably Tibbs style, either doesn't touch the quarter, plays like 4 minutes. What is going to be interesting to look at, though, real quick, and again, I am trying to keep this show agile for the handful of you guys that are here. Those of you who are here, absolutely rock. Appreciate you. Short notice, handful of people still made it. I love it. The dedicated few. I'm just getting wowie in place here. What I want to look at is just kind of like the reverse of what I was talking about the other day, where there's a direct benefit to Karl Anthony Towns and Josh Hart when Jalen Brunson is out. I want to see what the impact when Karl Anthony Towns is not on the floor is to the rates on some of these guys, because that's really the key. Everybody in the world is going to be like, all right, Precious is going to get some minutes. We'll get a little bit of Jericho Sims minutes, but people might miss what happens to other guys' rates. So let's see. With no Towns, do we know Deuce? Larry is out. Great. So that's, I know I'm bouncing around a little bit, but there are a number of pieces of interesting news. That'll be just real quick. It's only 14 minutes that's going to drop in. Reggie Jackson's right there. He'll pick up a handful of those and go from 12 to like 20. And that's probably going to be most of it. Maybe I throw Eric Gordon a few minutes. I don't currently have him projected. I have Ricky Council at like 1 minute. So there's options for where those go. I think it's just downstream in that direction, especially with Reggie there. And then, we'll deal with Kelly Oubre if we get that one. So for the Knicks, assuming that is the case, obviously, with Cat, we go, JB stays about the same. Not only would Precious take a pretty big leap in minutes, got him at 18, he would jump to 28 to 30 probably. He also has been playing at a 1.04. It's only in 170 minutes, 338 possessions. It's not the craziest big sample. None of these are going to be crazy, crazy big, but that's noteworthy. I've got him, that's essentially 0.2 of a fantasy point per minute more than what I've got him at. So he would have a nice upward trajectory. Josh Hart goes up significantly, as one might expect. He basically plays this at the same rate that he plays when Brunson's not on the floor, 1.04. That's up from 0.91 that I've got him at for today. I might not go all the way to these marks because this is a terrible, terrible game environment against a pretty good defensive team. But these guys are going to go up. So Hart's going to be one to watch. Precious obviously going to be one to watch. OG going to gain. He's at 0.99 in 395 minutes with no Cat. So he'll gain a little bit of ground. Bridges is essentially right around where I've got him. Might pick up a little bit. And then everybody else is just, odds and ends. But those guys in particular, very interesting. Brunson's going to be right around where he is. I'll probably give him like a little bit of a nudge upward, but he plays essentially at the level I've already got him at. But definitely an impact in minutes and rate for Precious Achiuwa. Josh Hart, impact in rate for sure. OG, impact in rate for sure. So those guys are getting more interesting if that's the case, if Cat doesn't play. So that's one to keep an eye on. And the reason we were talking about that, if you weren't here a minute ago, is because the Knicks recalled Ariel Kaporti from the G League squad in Westchester. All right, continuing on. So we made it most of the way through the guards there, I think. Let me just make sure there's nobody lingering at the bottom of the FanDuel board that we didn't talk about. 5:47, we are, again, punching out of here by 6 o'clock. Dinwiddie, we discussed, don't love it, but it's there on FanDuel at 56. It is not really there on DraftKings at 65, and I'd rather have Quentin Grimes on both sites. Maxi's going to go up from here. 11% on DraftKings. He's a 116 player under normal circumstances. There is more rate there when Joel Embiid is not available, which he's not. Plus, we've got these other missing bodies for Philly, so I would expect to get more Maxi than this. He was already coming up a decent amount, even though he's a sub-5 value on FanDuel. He'll get more shares on FanDuel, probably kick up to like 20-something and more level with the field. DraftKings will be interesting. I mean, he was already a 5+ value over there, not 5.5, but still 5+ at 86, and we didn't get him at all. I think he's just getting boxed out of those point guard spots by all those shares. So that's another one to keep in mind if you're going away from some of these Cole Anthony shares, if you're going away from some of the other chalky point guards, especially like if you're going away from some Cade shares, like the sim is telling us to, then maybe you sink them into Maxi for a cheaper price. I think that actually makes a decent amount of sense. The field might be headed in that direction already anyway, but if you're already going under on Cade, you can take a bigger position under, call it 30%. Give yourself another 7 percentage points to work with, and sink those directly into Maxi. At 86, you'll still have more room to work with the spread to other guys. Outside of that, not much here. Good boy. Forwards. There's a lot of our FanDuel star money. $11,900 Giannis is coming up 55% of the time. He's technically only probable to play, but I'm expecting him. 52% on DraftKings. We have plenty of money to spend, and we're getting a ton of Giannis. Makes total sense. Don't think we need to explain that one too much. Devin Vassell, 20% on FanDuel, below the field for 65. We are well above a 5 value score. He's a 0.96 per minute player. It's not a bad price, especially against Chicago. That should be a decently pacey spot against a bad defensive team. I don't mind more shares of Devin Vassell than this and being closer to the field. That's one where I'd be fine being essentially level with the field for that mid-range type play. At 61 on DraftKings with multi-position, we're getting a pretty decent chunk of them. I like that a lot. Nas at 26 minutes for 47 on DraftKings comes up quite a bit. 41% of the time. He's playing at 0.99 overall this season. Definitely just depends on, do we get the 23 minute version of Nas, or do we get the 25-minute version of Nas? Last time out, 25 minutes, we only got 14.1 FanDuel points, so that was neither of those versions of Nas. We got Nas. We got the minutes, but not the rate that time. But typically, when the minutes are there, the rate is supporting a pretty decent fantasy score. On DraftKings, still think he's a playable, mixer value type. On FanDuel, for 55, not really that in play. We're below the field. He's below a 5 value, 6% exposed. I'd be fine, honestly, if I had a couple shares or no shares. If I came out of a sim, I wouldn't be like, oh my God, got to rerun things. I didn't get any Nas. By the same token, if I have some, like that much, I'm okay with that. I wouldn't be looking to get away from it. Brandon Clark, another guy who's just radically different from site to site. 48 on FanDuel, very little value, 8% below the field. That does put him at a 5+ value, so I shouldn't say he's very little value, but relative to the other things on this slate, he is of very little value. 3,900 on DraftKings, totally different story. He's a 5.98 value score. 34.6% exposed. That's level with the field. He looks like a great option at 3,900 power forward and center eligible. RJ in with an undisclosed minutes projection says power. I don't think we were going RJ anyway. All that's going to do is maybe impact some of what Quickly looks like, some of what Scotty looks like up at the top. I don't think we were going RJ. Highest ceiling player on the slate before you punch out, please, on DK by ownership, asks Mamba. That's an interesting enough question. Just given that I think it's a reasonable argument to be made. Well, if it was FanDuel, it would be a more reasonable argument to be made that it's Wemby. But Giannis is more likely to play like the 1 or 2 extra minutes beyond what Wemby plays. Not always, but a little bit more likely to play. You can see it in the average, 33-1 versus 35-2. So those 2 extra minutes become absolutely critical to that question when we're talking about a 1.67 versus 1.65 per minute rate. Those are your 2 highest rates. So if you're talking about just the pure highest overall ceiling, it's one of those 2 guys, and it comes down to those final 2 minutes. If you're talking about from like a best play ceiling for the money kind of a thing, it's almost certainly Cole Anthony. Anthony at 1.07 per minute for 4,900. That's a nearly unrivaled value play. And that's why we're getting him 97% of the time. So it depends on, relative ceiling or just pure absolute ceiling. If it's pure absolute ceiling, it's you could just kind of go in order of star caliber. Giannis, Wemby, Cade can certainly be on that list at 138. Whoever this is at 145. Well, Embiid, but he's not playing anymore. I would have been a little bit more remiss to say Embiid. Karl-Anthony Towns, we'll see whether he's playing, but he would be on that list. But it is diminishing returns as you go down that list as far as what the actual ability to reach an 80-point fantasy score, let's say, would be. Those minutes are exactly why I asked that question. Yeah, and really that is what it comes down to. I mean, they're playing at almost identical per minute marks. There was a slightly larger gap last year with Wemby outperforming him. And it is more pronounced slightly. Wemby is technically ahead by 1/100th of a point on FanDuel, where stocks count a little bit more. But it's very close, and it's most definitely those 2 guys in the just absolute ceiling sense. Quickly, by the way, did I breeze through quickly somehow? I did mention him, I feel like. Might be a minor impact to that. We're getting him 74% of the time now that we know for sure that RJ is going to be in. I have to look. Let me see where I put him. I think I had him like right around his typical marks. I don't think. No, it's a little bit higher. That's a moderate game environment. $231 point total, actually. That's might be about right. He's drawn a little bit out of the game. I might put a minor impact on it now that I'm sure that RJ is going to be there. But it'll be not significant enough to cut him further than, like, let's say from 74 to 64, something like that. And it's not because he's coming up so much. I do think it's a decent play at 6,700. He's been at 1.13 per minute so far this season. He was a 1+ per minute player last year. At 36% on DraftKings for 7,000. It's already kind of impacted by that slightly higher price. But that might draw down just slightly. It'll probably impact this a little bit more, just given the way that price is going to work. All right, let's get through the rest of forwards. And I'm going to add centers to this right now because I just looked at the clock again. And we're about to collide with 6. All right, so Giannis obviously drawing a ton of shares. Super critical. We talked about Vassell. We talked about Nas. Wemby on FanDuel, 16%. We're below the field. If you can carry more, take more. He's absolutely fantastic, and nobody on Chicago can stop him from doing essentially whatever he wants to in that game. On DraftKings, he's only 11-1. He is, again, slightly less valuable, but we're talking about 3/100ths of a fantasy point per minute. You won't notice the impact on the final result at 11-1. That's more than taken care of by that price discount from site to site. We got him 40% of the time on the DraftKings slate. That's fantastic. The only thing he's missing on DK is the multi-position. On FanDuel, he's got power forward and center. DraftKings center only, but you've got Giannis with center and power forward eligibility, so you can already move them around a little bit together, and you've got the util spot to work with, so it really doesn't matter. Brandon Clark at 8% on FanDuel, but 34% on DraftKings. Another guy from Memphis with just frustrating minutes allocations. He played 26 last time out, put up a 23.2. Could easily play that many minutes again today. I've got him just at 22 minutes right now. Might move things around. Just keep an eye on it, and whoever comes up from Memphis, you can take those shares. But not looking like a priority on FanDuel. At 39 on DraftKings, though, there's more than enough value there, even in 22 minutes. So if the minutes go up, if the projection goes up, there's every reason in the world to just chase it up the ladder. Tobias is who he is, kind of a spot overall. 38.6% for him. He's a 0.90 per minute player. Obviously, for everybody on Detroit, there's just more to do right now. But Tobias is never really going to be my priority. I would definitely rather have the field's at like 38 to 35 to 40%. Give me 25%. Let me undercut the field, take a position instead of being directly with the field on only a moderate play. 33 minutes the other day, put up 31.2. That's what you get out of Tobias Harris more often than not. And again, that every time I say that, I get annoyed because that applies to everybody, obviously. But Anthony Black getting any love? Asks Steve Cunningham. Don't recall saying his name as we went through that. We can check it out in just a sec, but right now I don't think so. Let me just put everybody back on the board. Nothing. Literally nothing across both sites in 22 minutes. 47 on DraftKings, 48 on FanDuel. He does have the multi-position on FanDuel. With all the missing bodies in Orlando, let's see. Him included recently. His last game, he did play 30 minutes. There's reason to believe that he could play more. Let me pull up my rotation for Orlando here real quick. Gotta stop saying real quick also. So let's see. That game we had... I could take like two of those. Yeah, you could very easily get him to like easily 24, and 26 minutes is sitting right there. I don't know that I would go north of that. It does look ownership-wise, just judging by where they've got him in the ownership projection. Let me reload it just to make sure. It does look like that's kind of the common thought right now. Yeah, not really looking that impactful right now. Jumping over to what the ownership looks like. Obviously, if we get him starting or something, it's a different story, and he would get that directly in the projections. But you'd have to make at least the assumption of a few additional minutes from where he is right now, and that would be like if he's not starting. No worries, Steven. It's worth asking. Thoughts on PJ Washington? Definitely. Whoops. As everybody's advanced stats from the NBA. 24% FanDuel, 12% DraftKings. We didn't get to him as we were going through the limited number of forwards. But yeah, PJ's on the board for sure, just with the missing bodies and his fairly solid 30-plus minutes. Played 31 the other day, 25.9 FanDuel points. He's averaging nearly 32 minutes. I've got him at 34. Again, given the just dearth of NBA bodies right now in Dallas, I do think that's viable. 0.92 per minute on DraftKings. He comes up a little bit less at the 65 than he does at the 68 on FanDuel, but we are below the field on both sites because we've got just so many strong spots across both sites. But yeah, PJ's easily on the board. It's 6:02, I know. I'm going to give this another couple minutes just to talk about any of the crucial guys. We do thin out awfully quickly among forwards and centers on DraftKings. Just a lot of weight going to those guys right there. That top group of players, that's 242% ownership across all forward spots in center. And we've got two big pieces in that with Giannis and Wemby. Then we get into the Denny's of the world. Denny, 26% on FanDuel, 23% on DraftKings. DK, I'd probably pick a lane, be a little bit above, a little bit below, and have a position kind of like what we do on FanDuel. But he does look decent. 6,700, the price is adjusted a little bit north on FanDuel, but he's playing a ton of minutes. He's a productive 1+ per minute player over the course of time when he gets minutes. So easy to go to some shares of Denny. Overall, just kind of looking like a mid-range type play, though. Not a priority on either site. McDaniels, mix and match on FanDuel. A little better than that on DraftKings, but below the field. Taurean Prince, nothing on FanDuel. 14-ish%, but below the field as a value mixer at positions where we've got other guys. 3,200, both forward spots, though. That is functional. 5.37 is short of our 5.5 threshold, but very playable value block for Taurean Prince. Keldon, never my favorite guy to get to. He's playing at a 0.91 this year. He was 0.95 last year. 20% usage down from 21.2 last year. 8% of them on the FanDuel slate. A little bit more than that on DraftKings at 13.3. He's only a $4,400 option over there versus the 49 on FanDuel. I've got him at just 22 minutes. He played 27 in the last game. Technically for the season, he averages 25, but they kind of bounce all around. You could easily give him another 2 or 3 minutes and take a little bit more of him. That would probably level him off to wherever the field is. But I'm happy to be a little bit light. PJ right there on that list, as we just went through. DeAndre Ayton, mix and match piece on both sides. Sounds like he's going to play. 6% FanDuel, 12% DraftKings. Not looking like a priority, but playable. 1.06 per minute, 1.05 for a reasonable price among all the big men. But there's obviously way better big man options to get to. Rudy Gobert at a 5+ value on FanDuel, where he's a little bit more of a valuable player. 5.3 value, though, for only 57 on DraftKings, where his price is fairly fair amount lower. Gives us 9% DK, but below the field, 4% FanDuel, but below the field. It's about where I want to be pretty much all the time on Gobert. A little bit is fine. Too much, you're typically overweight, and he's just hamstringing your lineups because he's not that productive of a player more often than not. Again, more often than not. Got to stop saying that. He's just not that good of a player because he lacks offense. He's missing essentially half the game. The ultimate collector of fantasy points. Jaren Jackson, significantly below the field, it looks like at 6% on DraftKings. He's not a bad option. 5.21 value from a $9,100 player who produces like he does is not a bad value score. We don't necessarily need 5.5 from a guy like Jaren Jackson. It's nice when we've got it, but you could easily justify more shares. That said, positionally, if we're going to be getting to all these, you're going to have to sacrifice somebody, and it's looking like it's some of our shares of Jaren Jackson against where the field has him. And I think given our numbers, that makes some sense. He's a 1.35 per minute guy, though. If you take a little bit more of him, that's fine. If you take a little bit less of either of these guys, you can put it directly into Jaren Jackson and upgrade another position. So there's at least some flex there with a very, very good player. Onesie, twosie shares on most of these guys. Again, I do like Quentin Grimes, but 2% on FanDuel. He's a 5+ value there, but we've got so many options going through that shooting guard position for value that he just kind of falls by the wayside. 10% on DraftKings across shooting guard and small forward. 5,500 on the DK slate. Very playable. Didn't get quite as much of him as I was expecting, honestly. But there are good reasons for that. Again, there's just so many good spots soaking up so many shares. 32% of Clay on FanDuel, just 4% on DraftKings. He's 6,000 DK, 57 on FanDuel with multi-position on both. More playable easily on the FanDuel slate at that 5.17, well over our value threshold, short of our value threshold on DraftKings. Just a differentiated play across sites, but playable on both, given the role, given the minutes that are there for him right now in Dallas. And honestly, the matchup is fine. Again, Embiid off the board. Daron Sharp coming up a little bit on DraftKings because he's only 3,800. The minutes are just going to be in the upper teens somewhere, typically. And I'm not going to give him a trajectory into like the low 20s. But the rate is nice. 1.08 per minute on DraftKings, 1.11 on FanDuel. Sohan, not really a priority on either site. Fine with being below the field when he comes up at a sub-5 value on FanDuel. Timmy Hardaway we talked about. Nick Claxton comes up a decent amount of the time for us. 5.39 value on FanDuel. We're getting him 10% on the single center site. That's not nothing. It's also not significant. It's below the field. And honestly, if I'm forgoing Nick Claxton shares and getting to, I don't know, more Wemby somehow, or like Brandon Clark who comes up, well, not really that much better for Brandon Clark. I don't know. Some of these other guys up here, I'm not going to waste time on it. I'm pretty happy to go in that direction. Claxton's fine, 1.02 per minute. And again, there are plenty of missing bodies to justify upside for essentially everybody in Brooklyn. What's up, Doug? Doug going the Tyrese Martin direction. That wasn't a name that flipped off the top of my head when we were talking about Philly, but definitely that's going to be interesting, especially assuming we're putting him into the starting lineup. If we get no Oubre, there's definitely even more to do there. I don't know about the Oubre thing right now, but yeah, I think I blew right past him when we were talking about Philly, but good call out. Conchar, another guy from Memphis, 28 minutes. Assuming he's out there at all. I think he's still questionable, right? Or was that Kennard? I always mix these guys up. Kennard's questionable. Conchar's in. He's fine. He is a 5+ value on FanDuel at that price. On DraftKings for 47, we only got him 2% of the time. Looks a lot less relevant on the DK slate. Playable piece on FanDuel, but again, not a priority. Not a guy I'm going to go out of my way for. Handful of shares of each of these guys on the Ron Holland, Jakob Pertl, Ben Mathurin, Patty Williams, Najee Marshall, Simone Ventecchio list. Then we get to Zach LaVine, who's an interesting player with plenty of upside against a reasonable enough opponent. You could see success for Zach LaVine. He's playing at a 1.05 this year, 25% usage. Both of those numbers up a little bit from where he was last season, which was expected. I don't mind more LaVine, but we are getting him below the field, and every share you take is just pushing him back to like a level play and sacrificing position. So I wouldn't force it on FanDuel. We didn't really get him on DraftKings for 82, just mispriced over there for his production. Plumlee, I've got him at 22 minutes, but supposedly he's going to be the starter, at least for the foreseeable future, so you could give him a few more. I don't really like most of what Phoenix is doing right now. It's good. I at least need to see it to know exactly how we're going to be shaped going forward for a minute, and then we'll see what any impact for trades or whatever looks like. 24% of Vooch is kind of interesting, 8,100 on FanDuel. We didn't get a single share because he's 8,800 on DraftKings, but at 81 on FanDuel, that's a really good per minute player. 1.25 per minute this year FanDuel score. Not a bad option, plays plenty of minutes. Got him at 34. He averages 32 too. He played 34 the last time out, put up nearly 42 FanDuel points. That's essentially right in line with his average, but for that money, that's pretty good. He's going to be a guy who occupies some center-only shares for sure. So you sacrifice, whoever up here, you can only get one of some of those combinations. But he's looking worth it. Everybody else at the best, not a priority. 3% of Zubac, 1% of Turner, basically 0 of all these guys on DraftKings. 1% of De Silva in starters minutes, 5,100 at small forward. Didn't really get him. He's a 0.66 per minute player. Doesn't really look all that relevant. Couple other onesie-twosies. Noah Clowney at a 5+ value. Comes up 4% of the time below the field on FanDuel. I'm fine with leaving most of that on the board. Kawhi, no minutes there to support any kind of play on either side. Don't play Kawhi Leonard until he's actually getting real minutes. Brolo not really coming up. OG, again, just if Karl Anthony Towns doesn't play, I would expect to get more OG because I'm going to give him a nudge for sure to reflect the rate. Same deal with Josh Hart. Neither one of those guys is coming up at all right now. Terrible game environment overall, but if you get a big missing piece like Karl Anthony Towns, it has a direct impact that we put numbers on earlier to justify it. So definitely more to get there. From the Nets. Wait, what the hell am I saying? Thank you, Doug. Yeah, from the Nets. Melting my brain. Who the hell was I thinking of on Philly? I was thinking of what's his face, who's hurt. Jared McCain. I don't know why Jared McCain and Tyrese Martin are the same guy in my head, but for some reason they were. That's exactly who I was thinking of. And he's not even available. Brain skip there from me. I think it was maybe because Tyrese Maxey on Philly and just drew my brain in that direction. I have no idea how I got to that as I was saying that. But yeah, total brain skip there to end this show. That's fun. I promise I know what I'm talking about. There's Martin. Yeah, he actually really didn't come up right now, but things are going to be on the move there and for Brooklyn, I would expect. Maybe it was a mix of Caleb Martin and Tyrese Maxey, and that blended together in my head, and then I was just thinking about the guy of Jared McCain and like the body and the player. I really don't know how I arrived at that. I appreciate you guys tolerating my clunky brain sometimes. You guys absolutely rock out there. Hit the like button. Hopefully back to a more regularly scheduled show for tomorrow. It's already 6:15. I got to get on updating some of this stuff. Just fell behind throughout the afternoon with updating stuff today. But check out the site, rotoscouts.com. We've got the hockey and basketball projections live today. We'll have football through the playoffs and everything. Under $1 a day for access to everything as usual. Let me punch out of here and get stuff updated. A lot of changes coming. Should be a fun, weird, wacky kind of a slate. Good luck out there tonight. Somebody go win something. I'll see you tomorrow.